My daughter stood up at the Thanksgiving dinner, raised her wine glass in front of 15 guests, smiled perfectly, like a skilled lawyer, and said, "I'm ashamed that my mother works in a cheap diner." Those words rang out across the room. A few people laughed softly. A few awkwardly looked down at their plates. I stood at the kitchen door, sensing the moment everything was about to change. But she had no idea I had prepared every piece of evidence about everything she had done to me. And when I started speaking, my daughter's face shifted from confident to panicked. "Thank you for spending your time with me. Before we continue, comment below and tell me where you're listening from." I read every single comment, and it means more than you know to see this community growing across cities, states, and countries. We may not know each other personally, but we're connected through stories like this. Please remember, parts of this story are dramatized for storytelling and learning purposes. Any similarities to real people or places are unintentional. The lessons, however, are meant to be meaningful and worth reflecting on. The turkey was golden. 15 faces filled my dining room. My daughter Victoria stood up with a wine glass in her hand, wearing that smile, the one she'd perfected in law school, the one that said she was about to win. I was still standing in the kitchen doorway, oven mitts warm against my palms. The voices around the table quieted. Someone set down their fork. I watched Victoria's fingers curl around the stem of her glass, watched the light catch the red polish on her nails, and I just knew that everything was about to change. To understand that moment, you need to know how we got there. 6 months earlier, it was late May. The lunch rush at Betty's Diner had just ended, and I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Victoria's name lit up the screen. My heart did that little jump it always did when she called, because she didn't call often. "Mom." Her voice was bright, almost breathless. "I got it, senior associate, they just told me." I dropped the rag and pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Oh, sweetheart Victoria, that's incredible." "I know, I can't even—" She laughed, that rare, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in months. "It's a big deal, Mom. Really big." For a second, I was back in her high school auditorium watching her accept the debate trophy with that same proud tilt of her chin. My throat tightened. "I'm so proud of you, honey. Can I come visit? We could celebrate maybe dinner in Chicago, my treat." The pause was barely a heartbeat, but I felt it. "I'm slammed right now, Mom. Maybe next month." "Of course." I forced brightness into my voice. "Whenever you're free. I know how hard you're working." "Thanks, Mom. I've got to run. Talk soon, okay?" The line went dead before I could say I love you. Ruth Miller, my coworker and closest friend for the past 15 years, looked up from the coffee station. She had that look, the one that said she'd heard every word. "She doesn't call much, does she?" I tucked the phone back into my apron and picked up the rag. "She's building a career, Ruth. You know how it is." Ruth didn't answer, just poured 2 mugs of coffee and slid one across the counter toward me. I wrapped my hands around it and stared out the window at the main street of Cedar Falls, Iowa. The same street I'd walked down for 30 years. The same diner where I'd worked double shifts to pay for Victoria's college textbooks, her law school applications, her bar exam prep course. She was busy, that was all. Busy was good. Busy meant success. That night, I stood in my living room holding an old photograph. Victoria, at 10 years old, wearing a paper crown from her school, her arms wrapped around my waist. Her smile was wide and crooked. She'd lost a tooth that week. I was smiling too, my hair longer than my face not quite so lined. When had we stopped looking at each other like that? I set the photo back on the shelf and told myself I was being silly. She was thriving. That was what mattered. Mothers were supposed to let go, weren't they? But standing in my kitchen doorway on Thanksgiving 6 months later, watching my daughter rise to her feet with that glass of wine and that courtroom smile, I finally understood. That phone call in May, the one where she couldn't make time, where next month never came, that was the beginning. That was the first thread pulling loose. And now, the whole thing was about to unravel. 1 month after that phone call, Victoria surprised me. She was bringing someone home. "Mom, I want you to meet James." She said, her voice lighter than it had been in years. "Saturday afternoon, we'll drive down." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and felt something flutter in my chest. My daughter was bringing a man home, for the first time, ever. The moment she hung up, I started cleaning. I scrubbed the counters until they gleamed, vacuumed the living room twice, and washed the curtains. I pulled out my mother's old recipe for pot roast, Victoria's favorite when she was little, and bought fresh flowers for the table. On Saturday morning, I stood in front of my closet for 15 minutes before settling on the navy dress, the one David had always said made me look elegant. When the doorbell rang that afternoon, my hands were shaking. Victoria looked radiant. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her blazer perfectly tailored. Beside her stood James Hartwell, tall, polished, with the kind of smile that belonged in a corporate boardroom. He was a businessman, she'd told me on the phone. Successful. Important. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Thompson, it's a pleasure. Please call me Margaret." I shook his hand, feeling the smoothness of his palm, the expensive watch glinting on his wrist. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." We sat at the table, and for the first hour, everything felt almost normal. James was charming, asking questions about Cedar Falls, complimenting the pot roast. Victoria laughed at his jokes, her hand resting on his arm. I watched them together and thought, maybe this is good for her. Maybe he makes her happy. Then James turned to me, his expression curious and friendly. "So, Margaret, what did you do before you retired?" The room seemed to tilt. I opened my mouth, the words already forming. "I work at Betty's Diner, have for 30 years," when Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Mom worked in education," she said smoothly, not looking at me. "She's retired now." I froze. The fork in my hand felt suddenly heavy. I turned to look at my daughter, and for just a second, her eyes met mine. There was something desperate in them, something almost pleading. "Don't," they said, "please don't." James was still smiling, waiting for me to say more. Victoria's hand tightened around her water glass knuckles, going white, and God help me, I nodded. "That's right," I heard myself say. "Retired a few years ago." Victoria's shoulders dropped just slightly. Relief washed over her face. The rest of dinner was torture. Every question felt like a trap I hadn't studied for. Every answer I gave felt like another lie I had to remember. By the time they left, my jaw ached from smiling. 2 days later, on Monday afternoon, I was refilling the coffee station at Betty's Diner when the bell above the door chimed. I glanced up out of habit, and my breath caught in my throat. James Hartwell stood in the doorway, briefcase in one hand, scanning the diner for a table. His eyes landed on me, on my apron, on the coffee pot in my hand. For a long, terrible moment, neither of us moved. I watched understanding settle over his face, confusion first, then embarrassment, then something that looked uncomfortably close to pity. He didn't sit down, he didn't order, he just turned around and walked back out the door, swinging shut behind him. My hands were shaking so hard I had to set the coffee pot down before I dropped it. That night, my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed across the screen. I almost didn't answer. "How could you—" Her voice was ice. "James is asking questions, Mom. Do you have any idea how this looks?" I gripped the phone tighter, feeling something hot and sharp rising in my chest. "I've worked an honest job for 30 years, Victoria. I'm not going to apologize for that." "You don't understand my world." Her words were clipped furious. "Image matters, perception matters. Stay away from downtown when James is around, okay?" Something cracked open inside me. "I raised you better than this. What happened to you?" The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen phone, still in my hand, and realized I was shaking, not with sadness, but with rage. My daughter was ashamed of me. The girl I'd raised alone. The girl I'd worked double shifts for, the girl I'd loved more than anything in this world. She was ashamed of me. Who was this person? The next morning, I dropped a coffee pot. Twice. The first time, Ruth Miller caught it before it hit the floor. The second time, I wasn't so lucky. Coffee spread across the counter in a dark puddle, and I just stood there staring at it, my hands still frozen in the air. "Okay." Ruth set down her order pad and stepped in front of me. "You've been somewhere else all morning. Talk to me." I grabbed a rag and started wiping, even though my hands were shaking. "It's nothing." "Margaret." She took the rag from me. "We've worked together for 15 years. I know when something's eating at you." So I told her. About the dinner, about the lie, about the phone call where my daughter told me to stay away from downtown so her boyfriend wouldn't see me in my apron. Ruth didn't look surprised. She just leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "This isn't the first time she's acted like you're invisible." I opened my mouth to defend Victoria because that's what mothers do, but Ruth held up a hand. When's the last time she introduced you to a colleague or a friend? When's the last time she posted about you online the way she posts about everything else? The words hit me like cold water. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I couldn't answer. Ruth's voice softened. There's a pattern here, isn't there? And suddenly I was remembering. Her law school graduation 3 years ago. I'd driven 5 hours to be there, sat in the back of the auditorium in my best dress. When I found her afterwards surrounded by classmates, she'd barely looked at me. Oh, Mom, you made it. No introduction, no, this is my mother. Just a vague wave and just someone here to watch. Her first big case win 2 years ago. She'd posted about it online. I'd seen it on her page. Thank you to my mentors, my colleagues, my firm. A whole paragraph of gratitude. My name wasn't in it. Her promotion celebration just a few months back. I'd asked if I could come. She'd said it was just work people and changed the subject. I looked at Ruth and something twisted in my stomach. There's a pattern. She nodded slowly. Yeah, honey, there is. On my lunch break, I walked to the Cedar Falls Public Library and sat down at one of the old computers. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I typed adult children distancing from parents. The articles that came up made my chest ache. Estrangement, emotional cutoff, conditional love. I read about children who were ashamed of their roots, who rewrote their histories to fit the lives they wanted. I read about parents who didn't see it coming until it was too late. I closed the browser and sat there for a long time staring at the blank screen. That night, I pulled out a small notebook from my kitchen drawer, one I'd bought years ago and never used. I opened it to the first page and wrote the date at the top. Then slowly, I started writing. Not evidence, just a record, for myself. May 28th, called to share her promotion, said she was too busy to see me. June 15th, brought James home, lied about my job, told me to stay away from downtown. I wrote down dates, conversations, the things she'd said, and the things she hadn't. Seeing it all there in black ink on white paper made it impossible to deny. When I finished, I picked up my phone. My finger hovered over Victoria's name. Then I pressed call. It rang 4 times before she answered. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Really talk. A pause. Then, I'm swamped right now. Can it wait? That word again, wait, later, soon. Words that never turned into actual time. Sure, I said quietly. Whenever you're ready. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then typed out a message, I love you. I'm always here when you're ready. The notification popped up almost immediately. Read, but no reply came. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me. The pattern was there, written in my own handwriting, undeniable. Something was deeply wrong. I just didn't know yet how much worse it was about to get. Late August on a Sunday afternoon, Victoria came home. She didn't call ahead. She just appeared at my door with a smile I hadn't seen in years, warm open like the girl who used to help me frost cookies in this very kitchen. She hugged me at the threshold, really hugged me and said, I missed you, Mom. I felt something crack open in my chest. Hope maybe, or relief. Come in, sweetheart, I'll make lunch. We sat at the kitchen table, and for 2 hours it felt like old times. She asked about my week, laughed at my stories from the diner, complimented the chicken casserole. She looked at me the way she used to, like I mattered. I didn't question it. I didn't ask why the sudden change. I was too starved for her attention to wonder if there was a reason behind it. After we finished eating, Victoria leaned back in her chair and folded her hands on the table. Her expression shifted just slightly. Still warm, but more serious now. Mom, I need to ask you something. My stomach tightened, but I nodded. Of course, anything. There's an investment opportunity at the firm. If I can put in $80,000, it'll help me make partner. It's a sure thing, Mom. But I don't have the cash right now. $80,000. The number hung in the air between us like something physical. My throat went dry. Honey, I don't have that kind of money. She reached across the table and took my hand. I know, but you have the house. I pulled my hand back just slightly. The house, just as collateral, a co-signed loan using the house as security. 6 months tops. I'll make the payments. I promise. You won't have to do anything. The house. David's house. The house we'd bought together 30 years ago. The house where I'd raised Victoria. The house that was the only security I had left in the world. Victoria, I don't know. Her eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic, just a shimmer along the lower lids. Don't you trust me, Mom? After everything you sacrificed, don't you want to see me succeed? The words hit me like a punch. Everything I sacrificed. The double shifts. The missed sleep. The years of working my fingers to the bone so she could have everything I never did. Of course I do, I whispered. She squeezed my hand. Then help me, please, just this once. I signed the papers that afternoon. She'd brought them with her tucked into her purse, already filled out. All I had to do was write my name at the bottom. When she left, she hugged me again. Thank you, Mom. I won't let you down. Weeks passed. I asked about the loan payments. How's that going, honey? It's handled, Mom. Don't worry about it. Another month, I asked again. She changed the subject. Then the letter came. White envelope, bank logo in the corner. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Overdue payment notice. I called Victoria immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail. And again, voicemail. For 3 days, I left 17 messages. 17. My voice got quieter with each one, more desperate. Victoria, please, I need to talk to you. Please call me back. Nothing. On the 4th day, another letter arrived. Foreclosure proceedings. 30 days to pay $12,000 or the house would be taken. I sat at my kitchen table with the notice in my hand, staring at the words until they blurred. $12,000. I didn't have $12,000. I had $400 in my savings account and a paycheck that barely covered groceries. Victoria wasn't answering. She'd used my love as a weapon, taken the one thing I had left, and now she wouldn't even pick up the phone because she didn't care. That was the truth I couldn't avoid anymore, sitting there with the foreclosure notice in my trembling hands. My daughter had lied to me. She'd weaponized my love, and she didn't care that I was about to lose everything. On the 4th day, I stopped calling. I got in my car. The drive to Chicago took 6 hours. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't stop for coffee. I just drove hands tight on the wheel, watching the highway stretch out ahead of me in an endless gray line. For decades, I'd protected her. I'd worked myself to exhaustion so she could have dance lessons and summer camps and college application fees. I'd skipped meals so she could eat. I'd worn the same coat for 10 winters so she could have new textbooks. And she'd repaid me by stealing my house. By the time I reached the city, I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious. Victoria's law firm was in the heart of downtown, a glass tower that reflected the sky, all sharp edges and cold light. Inside the lobby was marble and steel, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. A receptionist sat behind a sleek desk, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She saw my worn jacket, my sensible shoes, the purse I'd carried for 15 years. Can I help you? Her tone was polite, but her expression said I didn't belong here. I straightened my shoulders. I'm here to see Victoria Thompson. I'm her mother. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe pity, and she picked up the phone. Ms. Thompson, there's someone here to see you. A pause, then she hung up and gave me a tight smile. She'll be right down. The elevator doors opened 2 minutes later. Victoria stepped out, her face flushed red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. She crossed the lobby in 6 long strides, her heels clicking against the marble. Mom, what are you doing here? She grabbed my elbow, trying to steer me toward the door. I didn't move. The bank is foreclosing on my house. My voice was steady, even though my hands were shaking. You said you'd make the payments. Victoria glanced over her shoulder. 2 colleagues stood near the elevator watching. Her jaw tightened. We can't talk about this here. Then, where... I pulled my arm free. You won't answer your phone. She looked around again, her face tight with humiliation. When she spoke, her voice was low and cold. Mom, you signed the papers. That makes it your responsibility. I have my own expenses. The words were so calculated, so sharp, like she'd practiced them. You promised? Security. Her voice cut through the lobby louder now. Security, please. A guard in a dark uniform stepped forward. Victoria turned to him, her expression smooth and professional, now like she was addressing a client. Please escort this woman out. I stared at my daughter. At this stranger in an expensive suit with perfectly styled hair and a face I barely recognized. She wouldn't even look at me. The guard touched my elbow, gentle but firm. "Ma'am, you need to leave." I didn't fight. I just looked at Victoria one more time and spoke quietly, clearly, so she'd hear every word. "I see who you really are now, Victoria, and I won't forget this." I turned and walked out, my head high, even though my heart was breaking into pieces inside my chest. The drive home was endless. The sun set somewhere along the highway and the darkness swallowed the road. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough. Now it was time to plan. If my daughter wanted a war, she'd just learned that her mother wasn't as weak as she thought. I drove straight to Betty's diner. It was late past closing, but Betty Morris, the owner, was still there, wiping down the counter. She looked up when I walked in, and whatever she saw in my face made her set down the rag. "Betty, I need every shift you can give me. I have 30 days to save my house." She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. "You take every shift we've got, honey." The next morning, Ruth showed up at my door with a folder in her hands and determination on her face. "Legal aid, free legal services. I'm driving you there now." The legal aid office was a cramped space above a pharmacy on Main Street. A young woman in a navy blazer opened the door and called my name. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Sarah Mitchell. Come on back." Sarah was maybe 30, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice. She sat across from me and spread out the loan documents I'd brought, the ones Victoria had handed me that Sunday. She studied them for a long time, her pen tapping against her lips. Finally, she looked up. "Some of these signatures don't match yours. Did you sign all of these pages?" I leaned forward, squinting at the lines of ink. My stomach turned over. "No, this one isn't mine, and this one either." Sarah's expression went very serious. "That's forgery, Mrs. Thompson. That's fraud. Your daughter committed a crime." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk. "What can I do?" Her voice was careful. "You can go to the police, but that means she'd face criminal charges, possibly jail time." I couldn't breathe. "I don't want her in jail. I just want my house to be safe." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then document everything. Keep the evidence. If she takes any legal action against you, we'll have the weapons to fight back." She spent the next hour teaching me what to record: dates, conversations, copies of every document. She wrote her cell number on the back of her business card. "Call me if anything changes." The next 30 days were the hardest of my life. I worked the morning shift at the diner, drove across town to cater lunch events, then came back for the evening shift. I got home past midnight most nights, my feet aching, my back screaming. Then I sat at my kitchen table and built my case. I photographed every document. I wrote detailed notes in chronological order. I kept copies in a file box under my bed. Ruth helped me set up a small fundraiser online, just a simple page explaining that a longtime diner worker needed help saving her home. The community showed up. $20 here, $50 there. Regulars from the diner. Neighbors I'd known for decades. People from church. By day 28, I had $11,000. On day 29, I withdrew $1,000 from my retirement fund, the emergency savings I'd been building for 15 years. My hands shook as I signed the withdrawal slip. On day 30, I walked into the bank and paid every single cent I owed, $12,000. The teller stamped the receipt and handed it back. "Your account is current, Mrs. Thompson. The foreclosure has been canceled." My house was safe. That night, I sat at my kitchen table at 2 a.m, surrounded by neatly organized documents. Copies of everything were stored at Ruth's house just in case. I had the evidence. I had the resolve. I'd thought I'd hit rock bottom when Victoria stopped answering my calls. I'd thought I'd hit it again when she had me thrown out of her office. But I'd been wrong. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I walked into Betty's diner for the morning shift, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. The customers were staring at me. Not just glancing, staring, whispering to each other. One woman actually turned her phone screen away when I walked past her table. Ruth grabbed my elbow the moment I stepped behind the counter. "Don't look at your phone yet. Come here." She pulled me into the back office and handed me her tablet. An article was pulled up on the screen, a legal industry magazine with a glossy layout and professional photographs. The headline read, "Rising Above Adversity: How I Overcame My Mother's Neglect to Achieve Success," by Victoria Thompson. The article had been written months ago, back in the summer. but it had just been published. My hands started shaking before I even began reading. My mother was emotionally absent, more invested in social relationships than in raising her child. A lie. She worked constantly to avoid being home. A distortion. I'd worked constantly so she could eat. There were times I went to school hungry because she forgot to go to the grocery store. I'd skipped meals so she wouldn't have to. She struggled with substance dependency. I didn't drink. I'd never touched anything stronger than coffee. I raised myself. I was in essence an orphan while my mother was still alive. I'd worked 3 jobs for her. 3 jobs. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the office chair, still clutching the tablet. Ruth crouched beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Keep reading," she said quietly. The article had gone viral in legal circles. Victoria was being praised as an inspiration, a self-made success story. A woman who'd triumphed over impossible odds, and I was the villain. When I finally looked up, Ruth's eyes were full of fury. "Every word of that is a lie, and you know it." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. Out front, a customer called my name. "Margaret, is it true what she said?" I didn't answer. I just stood up, handed Ruth the tablet, and walked out the back door. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and read the entire article online. Then I read the comments. Hundreds of them. "Her mother is a disgrace. How could anyone neglect their child like that? Victoria Thompson is a hero for surviving this." My phone started ringing. An old neighbor. "Margaret, honey, is it true? We had no idea." Another call. An acquaintance from church. "We're so sorry we didn't know what you were going through." Some people were angry at me. Some people pitied me. All of it hurt. I called Sarah Mitchell, my voice shaking so hard I could barely get the words out. "This is slander. Can I sue her?" Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "You can, but it'll take years and cost thousands of dollars you don't have." "Then what can I do?" There was a pause. Then Sarah said, "Tell your truth, Margaret. Publicly. With evidence. It's faster and it's free." I sat there for a long time after we hung up, staring at the screen at Victoria's smiling, professional headshot beside the article. That night, I sat alone in my living room and read the lies over and over again. I cried not because I was weak, but because the injustice of it all was suffocating. But by the time the sun came up, something had changed. I wasn't sad anymore. I was ready for war. The morning after the article went live, I didn't go to work. I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook and made a list. Ruth let herself in through the back door around 9. "Maggie." I looked up. "I need everyone who knows the truth. Will you help me?" She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. "Tell me what you need." Over the next 7 days, we visited witnesses, systematically, methodically. Days 1 and 2. Mrs. Eleanor Foster, Victoria's retired 5th grade teacher. She was 80 now, living in a small assisted living apartment, but her memory was sharp as ever. "You came to every parent-teacher conference?" she said, pulling out an old filing box from her closet. "Even after double shifts, you volunteered every single week." She handed me a stack of yellowed sign-in sheets, volunteer logs from the school. My signature week after week for 5 years straight. "I kept them," she said quietly. "I always keep them." She wrote a letter that night on official school stationery she'd saved from her teaching days, detailed, witnessed, notarized. Days 2 and 3, Dr. Patricia Warren, our family physician for 25 years. She pulled Victoria's and my medical records, the parts she was legally allowed to share. "No history of substance use," she said, highlighting the relevant sections. "Clean record, annual checkups. You were here every time Victoria needed a physical for school or sports." She wrote a letter on clinic letterhead, signed and dated. Days 3 and 4. Pastor Robert Miller. He'd known our family since David passed. He met me in his office at the church, and when I told him what Victoria had written, his face went hard. "After David died, you worked harder than anyone I've ever known. You raised that girl with pure, selfless love. I saw it." He offered to testify, in writing, in person, whatever I needed. Days 4 and 5, Mr. Frank Rodriguez, our old neighbor. He still lived 2 doors down from the house where Victoria grew up. He brought out a shoebox full of old photographs, pictures of Victoria as a little girl, pictures of me and her at school events, birthday parties, science fairs. I remember when you sold your car to pay for her debate camp, he said. You walked to work for 2 years after that. 6 miles a day round trip. He wrote it all down, dates, details, memories. Days 5 and 6, I gathered everything else. Letters Victoria had written me from college thanking me for my support. Medical records. Work schedules showing the shifts I'd worked to pay her tuition. Receipts I'd obsessively saved over the years. Proof of every grocery run, every school supply purchase, every sacrifice. Ruth and I organized it all into a box, chronological, undeniable. Day 6, I made a tactical move. I called James Hartwell, Victoria's boyfriend. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Mrs. Thompson, James asked your girlfriend about the $80,000. Ask her about the forged signatures. You deserve to know who you're standing next to. I hung up before he could respond. The seed was planted. Day 7, Ruth and I sat at my kitchen table and wrote Thanksgiving invitations. Every word was carefully chosen. We sent them to the truth-tellers, Mrs. Foster, Dr. Warren, Pastor Miller, Mr. Rodriguez. We sent them to distant relatives. And we sent 3 special invitations, one to Victoria, one to James, and one to Gerald Morrison, the senior partner at her firm. I sealed the last envelope and set it on the table. I knew she'd come. Her arrogance wouldn't let her stay away. Victoria thought she'd won. She had no idea what I'd prepared. 1 week before Thanksgiving, I got a text from Victoria. I'll be there, bringing James and my senior associate, Gerald. Looking forward to it. My hands started shaking. This was really happening. I spent the entire week preparing not just the food, though I did that too. Turkey stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, 3 kinds of pie. I wanted the meal to be perfect not for Victoria, but for everyone else who deserved it. More than the food I prepared myself. I practiced what I was going to say, standing in front of my bedroom mirror like I was rehearsing for a play. I figured out where I'd place the evidence box right in the center of the table where everyone could see it. I rehearsed keeping my voice steady even when my heart was racing. I went over it again and again until the words felt almost real. Ruth stopped by nearly every evening that week. She'd sit at my kitchen table, drinking tea, watching me check and recheck my notes. "Are you ready?" she'd ask. I never knew how to answer. What if no one believes me? Ruth squeezed my hand across the table. "You have the evidence, Maggie. You have the witnesses. You have the truth. That's more than enough. What if she won't listen? What if she just gets up and walks out?" Ruth's voice was steady, almost fierce. "Then she walks out. But you're not doing this for her. You're doing this for yourself, to take back your dignity, your name, your life." I wanted to believe her. I tried so hard to believe her. The day before Thanksgiving, my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed across the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before I answered. Her voice was sweet when I picked up, artificially sweet. "Hi, Mom. Just confirming for tomorrow. What time should we arrive?" 3 o'clock. "Perfect. I'm bringing Gerald Morrison, my senior partner. He's very influential. It would be great if you could make a good impression." I kept my voice calm even though my hands were trembling. "I'll be myself. That's all I can do." There was a pause. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then her voice turned cold. "That's what I'm afraid of." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone for a long moment, feeling the weight of those words settle over me. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen with the evidence box on the table in front of me. I opened it one more time, checking that everything was there. The letters, the photographs, the medical records, the witness statements, all of it organized and ready. I looked up at the photograph of David on the shelf, his kind eyes, his gentle smile, the man who'd believed in me when no one else did. I whispered to the picture, my voice barely audible. "I hope I'm doing the right thing." He didn't answer, of course, but I imagined he would have told me to stand tall, to fight, to show the world who I really was. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the words I'd say over and over. I imagined Victoria sitting across from me with that cold, calculated expression, flanked by James and Gerald, thinking she'd already won. I thought about all the ways it could go wrong. What if she denied everything in front of everyone? What if she twisted the truth again? What if people still believed her, polished lies over my messy truth? But then I thought about the evidence. The truth written down in black and white, witnessed, signed, undeniable. I had the truth, and this time I wasn't going to let her take it away from me. By the time the sun came up, I was still awake. I got out of bed, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the pale November light spread across the frost-covered backyard. No amount of preparation could make me ready for this. I was about to confront my daughter in front of everyone who mattered. I was about to tell her that it ended here, and I had no idea if I was strong enough to do it. Thanksgiving afternoon, 2:30, the first guests started arriving. I was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on the turkey, my hands shaking just slightly. The evidence box sat on the counter beside me, ready. Ruth Miller was the first through the door. She pulled me into a hug and whispered in my ear, "You can do this." Over the next 30 minutes, the truth-tellers arrived. Pastor Miller with his steady presence, Dr. Warren with her calm professionalism, Mrs. Foster with her kind, weathered smile, Mr. Rodriguez carrying a bottle of wine and a warm embrace. By 3 o'clock, my relatives had arrived, Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob, a few cousins I hadn't seen in months. The house filled with voices, laughter, the smell of turkey and pumpkin pie. Aunt Linda hugged me in the hallway. "Margaret, this is quite a crowd. What's the occasion?" I kept my voice light. I just wanted everyone together. She squeezed my hand and smiled, oblivious to what was coming. The atmosphere felt almost normal. People helped set the table, poured drinks, chatted about the weather and football. The house smelled like Thanksgiving should, warm, inviting, safe. For a moment, I almost let myself believe it could stay that way. At 3:15, a black car pulled up to the curb. I watched from the kitchen window, took a deep breath, and wiped my hands on my apron. Victoria stepped out first, polished professional, her blazer perfectly tailored. James Hartwell followed, looking uncomfortable. And then came Gerald Morrison, the senior partner, a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. Victoria had brought him here to evaluate her, to see her family values before they made her a full partner. She had no idea what she'd just walked into. I opened the door before they could knock. "Victoria, James, welcome." Victoria leaned in and kissed my cheek, a gesture so cold it might as well have been a handshake. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." She turned to the man beside her. "This is Gerald Morrison, my senior partner at the firm. Gerald, this is my mother." Gerald extended his hand, his smile professional and warm. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Thompson. Victoria speaks so highly of your family values." I shook his hand and met his eyes. "Does she—" Victoria's gaze sharpened. She heard something in my tone. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the faces. When she saw Mrs. Foster sitting on the couch, her expression flickered confusion, then suspicion. "Mrs. Foster, I haven't seen you since elementary school." Mrs. Foster smiled gently. "Hello, Victoria. Your mother invited me." Victoria turned to me, her voice low. "Why is my old teacher here?" I kept my voice steady. "She's a family friend. Shall we eat?" I'd arranged the seating carefully. Victoria sat between James and Gerald at one end of the long table. I sat at the other end. The truth-tellers were scattered throughout, Pastor Miller beside Aunt Linda, Dr. Warren, beside Uncle Bob, Mrs. Foster near the center, Mr. Rodriguez across from Ruth. At 3:45, everyone took their seats. I stood at the head of the table and folded my hands. "Let's say grace." Everyone bowed their heads. "Thank you for this food, this home, and for everyone gathered here. Everyone who knows the truth about our lives." I opened my eyes. Victoria's jaw was tight. She'd heard it, the emphasis, the warning. From 4 to 4:30, dinner proceeded. People passed dishes, made small talk, laughed at Uncle Bob's jokes. But underneath it all, there was a hum of tension, like a wire pulled taut. At 4:30, Gerald turned to me with a friendly smile. "So Margaret Victoria mentioned you worked in education before you retired." I set down my fork. The room went quiet. "No," I said clearly. "I work at Betty's Diner. I'm a waitress. Have been for 30 years. Victoria's face flushed red. James looked at her. Another lie. Gerald recovered quickly, his smile never faltering. "Oh, I must have misunderstood. Well, honest work is honorable work." But the damage was done. Victoria knew the cracks were showing. She stood up, slowly picking up her wine glass. That polished lawyer smile spread across her face. 15 faces turned to look at her. I knew what was coming. Everything was about to change. Victoria stood with her wine glass raised, that perfect lawyer smile on her face, and spoke the words I'd been dreading. I'm ashamed that my mother works in a cheap diner. The words hung in the air like poison. 15 people sat frozen forks halfway to their mouths, glasses suspended in midair. Victoria continued, her voice confident, rehearsed like she was delivering closing arguments. My mother had opportunities. She chose mediocrity instead. She could have been more, done more. But she settled for serving coffee and pancakes to strangers who don't even remember her name. She paused for effect, looking around the table, meeting eyes. Everything I've achieved, I did alone, despite her absence, despite her neglect, despite the fact that I was essentially an orphan while she was too busy working double shifts to notice me. Her voice turned bitter, performatively wounded. I've had to overcome so much shame about where I came from, about who raised me. Around the table, guests shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at their plates. Aunt Linda's mouth hung open. Uncle Bob looked down. Ruth's hand tightened around her fork. James sat very still, his expression unreadable. Gerald Morrison nodded slowly, his face full of sympathy. He clearly thought this was brave, vulnerable honesty from a woman overcoming trauma. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Enough. The room went completely silent. Every eye turned to me. I kept my voice calm, steady, dignified. My hands weren't shaking anymore. You don't get to rewrite history in my house, Victoria. Victoria tried to recover, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Mom, this isn't the time. I didn't let her finish. Sit down. You've had your turn. Now it's mine. Victoria sat slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide. She'd never seen me like this. None of them had. I stood at the head of the table and looked at each person in turn before I began. For 30 years, I've worked at Betty's Diner. Some days 1 shift, usually 2 shifts. Sometimes 3 when the bills piled up and Victoria needed new textbooks or debate camp fees or college application money. I walked slowly around the table as I spoke, my voice steady and clear. I came home every night smelling like grease and coffee. My feet ached so badly I could barely stand. My back hurt. But I never missed a parent-teacher conference. I never missed a school play. I never missed a single moment that mattered to you. Victoria stared at her plate, her jaw tight, her knuckles white around her wine glass. I walked to the side table where I'd placed the evidence box earlier. I picked it up, carried it to the center of the dining table, and set it down with a solid thunk that made the silverware rattle. I opened it slowly, deliberately, so everyone could see what was inside. The first piece of evidence, a thick stack of yellowed papers held together with a paper clip. Volunteer attendance sheets from Cedar Falls Elementary School, kindergarten through 5th grade. I held them up so everyone could see. Every single volunteer sign-in sheet from Victoria's elementary school years. My signature on everyone, every single week, for 5 years straight. I passed them to Pastor Miller on my right. He took them, carefully examined them, then passed them to the next person. They moved around the table slowly, each person studying them, their expressions shifting from confusion to understanding. Mrs. Foster spoke up, her voice clear and firm despite her 80 years. I can confirm every word of that. Margaret was there every single week, room parent, field trip chaperone, bake sale organizer. She helped students with reading decorated bulletin boards, made sure every child felt valued. I taught for 40 years, and I never saw a more present, devoted parent. Victoria tried to interrupt, her voice sharp. That was years ago. Things changed. I cut her off, my voice stronger now. You said I chose work over you. Let me show you exactly what I chose. I reached back into the box. There was more. So much more. And I wasn't going to stop until every single person in this room knew exactly what kind of person my daughter had become. I reached into the box again. Evidence number 2, medical records. You wrote that I struggled with substance dependency. I looked directly at Dr. Warren. Would you care to address that? Dr. Patricia Warren stood, her voice calm and professional. I've been Margaret's physician for 25 years. Her medical records show absolutely no history of substance use disorder. None. Not alcohol, not prescription medications, not anything. Her annual blood work has always been completely clean. She held up a sealed summary document and handed it to Gerald Morrison. This respects patient privacy laws but confirms my professional statement. Gerald examined it carefully, his lawyer's eyes scanning every line, then nodded slowly. Victoria tried to interrupt, her voice rising. I didn't mean it, literally. You wrote it, I said, my voice sharp and clear. You published it. People believed it. That's slander, Victoria. Around the table, people were watching her now with new eyes. Aunt Linda's expression had shifted from sympathy to shock. I pulled out the third set of evidence stacks of receipts held together with rubber bands. You said I forgot to feed you, that you went to school hungry because I couldn't be bothered to buy groceries. I spread the receipts across the table like playing cards. Yellowed paper, creased and worn, but every word still legible. Every single week, regular as clockwork, I budgeted every dollar. You were never hungry. I picked up one receipt and read it aloud. Cedar Falls Market, $43.16. Milk bread, peanut butter, chicken, vegetables, fruit. I set it down. Every week looked like this. My voice softened but didn't waver. I was the one who was hungry. I skipped meals so you could have seconds. I weighed 98 pounds when you left for college, Victoria. Every dollar, every bite of food I gave to you first. Aunt Linda started crying softly. Ruth reached over and squeezed her hand. I reached to the bottom of the box and pulled out an old file folder, its edges soft with age. Evidence number 4, educational records. You said I was emotionally absent, that I never cared about your education or your achievements. I opened the folder carefully. Inside were progress reports, teacher notes, every award Victoria had ever received from kindergarten through high school. On each one, my handwriting filled the margins. So proud, let's celebrate with ice cream. I cried happy tears when I read this. I handed the folder to Mrs. Foster. She flipped through it slowly, her weathered hands gentle, and nodded. Margaret cried at every single achievement. Parent-teacher conferences, honor roll announcements, debate team victories. She glowed with pride, every single time. Finally, I pulled out the 5th piece of evidence proof of financial sacrifices. You said you raised yourself. Let me show everyone here who actually paid for that self-raising. I laid them out one by one carefully so everyone could see. LSAT prep course invoice, $2,400 withdrawn from my savings account. Law school tuition payment receipts semester after semester, and then the car sale receipt, $3,800 dated the same month as the deposit for debate camp. Mr. Rodriguez spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. I remember that day. Margaret sold her car to a neighbor. She walked to work for 2 years after that to pay for her daughter's activities. I nodded, meeting his eyes. 6 miles round trip, every single day, in the snow, in the summer heat, in the rain. Because my daughter needed those opportunities, and I made sure she had them. James was staring at Victoria now, something close to disgust written on his face. Gerald's expression had gone cold, professional, calculating. The senior partner was reassessing everything. The truth was undeniable. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every yellowed receipt painted the same picture, a mother who'd sacrificed everything and a daughter who'd repaid her with lies. I placed my hands flat on the table and looked directly at my daughter. Her face was pale, her jaw tight, her eyes shining with something that might have been tears or rage. And now, I said quietly, the betrayal that almost cost me everything. If you're still here, comment I'm here so I know you're standing with me, and tell me if you were in my place, would you stop now? Or reveal everything, no matter the cost? Because what came next changed everything. And just to be transparent, the next part includes some dramatized elements for storytelling and reflection. Some details may be fictionalized. If this isn't for you, you're free to step away here. I reached to the very bottom of the box and pulled out the final set of documents. Loan papers, foreclosure notices, bank statements. Around the table, everyone leaned forward. 6 months ago. I said, my voice steady. My daughter asked me to co-sign a loan for a partnership investment opportunity. $80,000. She promised she'd pay it back within 6 months. I laid the loan documents on the table one by one. She didn't pay it back. She stopped answering my calls, and she forged my signature on additional paperwork without my knowledge or consent. I held up 2 documents side by side, one with my real signature, one with the forgery. The bank almost took my house, the house David and I built together. I had 30 days to come up with $12,000 or lose everything. I set them down. My daughter committed fraud. She forged legal documents, and she didn't care that I almost became homeless. Around the table, people stared. Aunt Linda covered her mouth. Pastor Miller shook his head. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. James Hartwell stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every eye turned to him. He looked at Victoria, his face filled with anger and disbelief. You told me your mother had early onset dementia. You said she was confused, that she didn't understand what she was signing. Victoria reached toward him. James, I can explain. He stepped back. You lied about everything. About your mother, about your childhood, about the money. What kind of person are you? Victoria's voice broke. James, please. He shook his head, disgust written across his face. You committed fraud against your own mother. You tried to steal her house. I can't be with someone who would do that. He turned to me, his expression softening. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Thompson. You deserved so much better. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Victoria stood frozen, her face drained of color. Gerald Morrison stood up next. His expression was unreadable, professional, cold. Mrs. Thompson, I apologize. We were clearly misled. Victoria spun toward him desperately. Mr. Morrison, you know me. My work speaks for itself. Gerald cut her off, his voice ice cold. Your work is excellent, Victoria. Your character, however, is now a very large question mark. Victoria's hands shook. Please, I can explain. You built your entire partnership pitch on a false narrative of overcoming adversity. Gerald continued. That narrative was a complete fabrication. You lied about your mother. You lied about your childhood, and you committed fraud. That reflects directly on your integrity as a potential partner. No, please wait. Gerald was already pulling on his coat. We'll discuss this Monday morning, but you already know what my recommendation to the board will be. He nodded to me. Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Thompson. I'm deeply sorry for what you've had to endure. And then he too walked out. Victoria stood alone at the table, surrounded by family members and witnesses who now saw her clearly. She looked around the room at the evidence spread across the table, at the faces staring at her with disgust, shocked disappointment. Her voice came out small and desperate. You're all going to believe her over me. I kept my voice calm, steady. I'm not asking them to believe me, Victoria. I'm showing them evidence. Victoria looked down at the loan documents, at the comparison of signatures at the foreclosure notice. She looked at the empty chairs where James and Gerald had been sitting moments ago, and I saw it. The exact moment she realized she'd lost everything, her relationship, her career, her reputation, her carefully constructed facade. Everything. After a long moment of silence, Victoria finally spoke. Her voice was small, broken. You don't understand what it's like, Mom. I asked quietly, what's like? Tears began to stream down her face. Being the daughter of a waitress, do you know what people said? What they assumed? The words felt like knives, but I kept my voice steady. That I was hardworking, honest. Victoria shook her head violently. That I was poor, that I didn't belong. Every networking event, every firm mixer, people asked about family. What was I supposed to say? My mom serves coffee and pancakes for a living. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. I spoke gently, though my heart was breaking. You should have said, my mother sacrificed everything for me. Victoria sobbed. That's easy for you to say. You don't live in my world. I held up both hands, calloused rough from 3 decades of labor. No, I built your world with these hands. Victoria whispered, I just wanted to be somebody. The pain in her voice was real, but so was mine. You always were somebody, I said. You were my daughter. Wasn't that enough? Victoria had no answer, only tears. I reached into my pocket. I had saved one final piece of evidence for this moment. Letters. Old letters Victoria had written from law school. I unfolded the first with trembling fingers and read aloud. Dearest Mom, I got the highest grade in contract law. I wish you were here to celebrate with me. I miss you. Thank you for everything. Love, Victoria. I opened the second. Mom, they announced the summer associate positions today. I got it. At the firm I've always dreamed of, I called you first because you're the reason I made it this far. I looked at her. You wrote these 8 years ago. What happened to that girl? Victoria couldn't answer. She couldn't reconcile the person she used to be with the person she had become. The guests began to leave quietly one by one. Pastor Miller squeezed my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Margaret." Mrs. Foster hugged me. "That girl needs to understand what she once had." Aunt Linda left in tears. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." Finally, only Ruth remained. "Do you want me to stay?" Ruth asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I need to talk to her, alone." Ruth looked worried but nodded. "Call me if you need anything." The door closed softly behind Ruth. Everyone was gone except my daughter. Victoria sat at the table surrounded by the wreckage she had created. In the end, it was just the two of us, mother and daughter. The turkey had gone cold. The evidence box lay open on the table, papers scattered around it like the shattered pieces of a life. The house smelled of pumpkin pie and regret. I sat down across from her the same way I had 1,000 times when she was little. When she came home from school upset, when she needed help with homework, when she wanted to talk about her dreams. But this time was different. This time I didn't know if there was anything left to save. Victoria stared at her hands, at the expensive rings on her fingers, at the perfectly manicured nails. They looked nothing like mine. "What happens now?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, organizing witnesses, planning every word. But I hadn't prepared for what came after. The truth was finally out. Everyone knew what she had done, who she really was. But I still didn't know if my daughter was lost forever or if somewhere inside her, that girl who wrote those letters still existed. Silence filled the house after Ruth left, just me and Victoria. I stood and began clearing the dishes, needing something to keep my hands busy. Victoria sat motionless, staring into space. Finally, I spoke. "You should go. It's a long drive back to Chicago." Victoria's voice was hollow. "I don't know if I still have a job to go back to." I kept washing the plates. "You'll figure it out. You always do." She looked at me. "Why did you do this?" I turned to face her. "You published lies about me in a magazine. I was just protecting myself." "You humiliated me," Victoria said. Her voice was accusing but weak. I set the dish towel down and sat across from her. "No, you humiliated yourself. I just told the truth." The silence stretched between us. Victoria finally admitted I was ashamed. "Of me?" I asked. She nodded. "Of everything, where we came from, who we were." I studied my daughter's face, a stranger who had once been my little girl. "You had a mother who loved you more than anything," I said quietly. Victoria whispered, "I know." "Do you?" I pressed. "Because you spent years erasing me, lying about me, stealing from me." Victoria flinched. "I didn't think you'd fight back." I leaned forward. "Why, because I'm just a waitress." Victoria said nothing. "I am a waitress," I continued. "I'm also your mother. I'm a survivor. I'm also strong. Those things don't contradict each other." Victoria wiped her eyes. "Everyone at the firm will know now." I was firm. "Good. Let them know the truth. You came from love, from sacrifice. There's nothing shameful about that." Victoria sounded defeated. "In my world, there is." I shook my head. "Then you're in the wrong world." Victoria stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Are you going to call the police about the forged signatures?" I had thought about this moment. A long pause. "No, you're my daughter. I won't put you in jail." Relief flooded Victoria's face. I continued, my voice steel. "But you will pay back every cent you took, and you will publish a correction in that magazine. The truth, all of it." Victoria asked softly, "And if I don't?" I looked straight into her eyes. "Then I will call the police. The choice is yours." Victoria nodded understanding. She opened the door, stopped. "Mom." I waited, but Victoria couldn't finish the sentence. She just walked out into the night. I sat alone in the house. The evidence box still sat on the table. Half-eaten food covered the dining room. The turkey sat cold on its platter. Dishes filled the sink. I looked around at the wreckage of Thanksgiving, the holiday that was supposed to bring us together, but had instead torn everything apart. And then I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I regretted what I'd done. I cried because I was exhausted, because the weight I had carried for so long, the shame, the confusion, the pain of being erased by my own child, was finally lifted. I had protected myself. I had told the truth. I had stood up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, putting away leftovers that no one would eat, washing dishes that had held a meal no one enjoyed. I locked the evidence box and placed it on the top shelf of my closet. Then I went to bed. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in years. The battle was over, but healing would take time. I didn't know if Victoria would pay me back. I didn't know if she would publish the correction. I didn't know if I would ever hear from her again. But I knew one thing: I had fought for myself, and that was enough. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. I woke slowly, my body aching but my heart lighter. Whatever came next, I would face it, because I wasn't afraid anymore. One year after that Thanksgiving, early morning at Second Chance's Cafe, the day before Thanksgiving, year 2, I stood alone in my cafe, the one I'd bought from Betty Morris when she retired 6 months ago. I'd renovated it, kept the warmth, but added something new: a wall of photos, staff and their stories. Rachel Martinez, 24, single mother, saving for college. Others who'd been given second chances. I stepped to the window with my coffee, watching dawn break over Cedar Falls. A year ago, my heart was broken. Today, I'm free. Ruth Miller walked in, now co-manager. Ready for tomorrow. We were hosting a community Thanksgiving at the cafe. I'm celebrating what I've built. I said, not mourning what I lost. Ruth asked carefully. Any word from her? I shook my head. Over the past year, Victoria had paid back all $80,000 with interest, published a correction in the legal magazine admitting the prior article was false, lost her job, moved to a smaller firm in another state. 3 months ago, a letter arrived. Mom, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I lost everything. But I'm starting to understand I lost it because of who I became. I'm in therapy, trying to figure out how I turned into someone who could hurt you like that. I'm sorry. I hadn't replied yet. I wasn't ready. Maybe someday. Ruth said, you know what I admire most? You found happiness without needing her apology. I smiled. That's freedom, isn't it? The next day, Thanksgiving at the cafe. 15 people gathered, some from last year's table, some new faces. I stood to speak. This cafe is called Second Chances because I believe everyone deserves one, including me. I spent 30 years being somebody's mother. I was good at it. I loved it. But I forgot how to live for myself. When my daughter told the world I wasn't good enough, I almost believed her. I looked around at the faces. This year taught me you can love someone deeply and still set boundaries. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. People nodded. Some wiped their eyes. Rachel's daughter, Emma, 6 years old, shyly approached. Miss Margaret, I made this for you. A drawing me wearing a crown. Caption, Queen of Second Chances. I knelt, hugging Emma. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll treasure it forever. That evening, I locked the cafe and walked home under the stars. I thought, do I miss my daughter? Yes, every day. Do I regret standing up for myself? Not for 1 second. Will we reconcile? I don't know. Maybe, when she's truly ready, when I'm truly ready. But here's what I know for certain. I'm 60 years old. I own a cafe. I mentor single mothers. I'm respected in my community. My hands are still calloused from decades of work. My back still aches some mornings. But I'm happy, truly deeply happy, because I finally understand I was never the shame, never the failure, never less than. I was always enough. I just needed to believe it. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm a cafe owner, a friend, a mentor, a survivor. And I know my worth. Finally, completely, I know my worth. Looking back at my story, I see the lessons God wanted me to learn. I spent decades sacrificing everything for my daughter, believing that love meant erasing myself. I was wrong. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're publicly humiliated to set boundaries. Family drama stories like mine aren't rare. So many parents, especially mothers, give everything and receive shame in return. Grandma stories across America echo the same pain. Children who grow distant, who rewrite history, who forget where they came from. These family drama stories become nightmares when we stay silent too long. Here's what I learned. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-destruction. You can be proud of your work, whatever it is. You can demand respect, even from your own children. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion of you. The grandma stories I heard growing up told me to endure silently. I'm telling you differently. Speak up. Protect yourself. You teach people how to treat you. These family drama stories need to end with empowerment, not defeat. My advice: set boundaries early. Don't sacrifice your identity for anyone. Stand up for yourself before it's too late. Grandma stories should inspire strength, not shame. If my experience helps even one person stand up for themselves, then every painful moment was worth it. God gave me the strength to face the truth, and He'll give you strength too. To everyone watching, subscribe if these real-life lessons resonate with you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your own experiences. I read every single one. Final note: this content contains dramatized storytelling for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the lessons and messages are completely valuable. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content that better suits your needs.